I like friends too. So where are you like actually from then?
Iran.
Isn't that like a third world country? So you're a refugee.
Not exactly.
سفیدپوستان دیوونن فکر کردن دخترها تو ایران همشون مجرد میمونن همشون راهبن
Yasi, you're really good. Really? If you dye your hair, it'll probably increase your chances.
Dye? So I just leave it on?
Mm-hmm. The instructions are just right in the box. You can read English, right?
Okay. Yes.
Perfect. Then you're all set.
Hi everyone, welcome to Carolyn Talks YouTube channel / podcast where I, your host, film culture critic and journalist Carolyn, I speak to film creators around the world about their work, the industry, and what inspires them. And today I'm very happy to be joined by writer and director Ava Maria Safai to talk about her debut feature film Foreigner, which premiered here at the 2025 Fantasia International Film Festival. And so Foreigner is about this young girl, Yasi, who has moved to Canada, and she is learning to assimilate into Canadian culture, particularly in 2000, around the 2004
2005.
Yeah, the fashion, the plaid skirts, the little sweaters is very distinctive era to mark, and it's an interesting era to enter a character like Yasmin in, because this is where, if you're familiar as a girl with the early 2000s aesthetic, it was very much about, oh my gosh, you know, like very much into small skimpy clothing for teenagers. Of course, a reference people can make would be like to Mean Girls, so like just think Mean Girls headers that even like Clueless in a way as a reference for how it looks and for everything. But it's about Yasmin learning to assimilate and kind of pushing aside her Iranian heritage and culture, and it's a horror, so like there is some a bit of, I think, mysticism and Iranian folklore involved in it. But first of all, thank you so much, Ava, for joining me.
Thank you so much, Carolyn, for having me. I'm really happy to be here.
Thank you. So this is your first feature film, but you've done short films before. Talk a bit about entering into filmmaking and your previous short films.
For sure. So my parents are musicians, so art has always been a thing in my family. I started on stage singing, playing piano, and then around high school I fell in love with directing, and at first did not like acting, but through the directing course I had to do it. And then I fell in love with acting, went to school for acting in university. And as soon as I graduated, it was COVID. So there was no work for me anymore. That's when I decided to start a production company. And then we started making little shorts and features because the actors and the crew were not doing anything during the pandemic. Eventually, in 2023, we did a short called Zip, which is about the women life freedom movement in Iran. And that was about a girl named Melody who wanted to sing at her school talent show, but her dad sews her mouth shut with a zipper. So yeah, that premiered at Crazy Eights, did really well, got the first standing ovation, and then I leveraged that to go to work.
Okay, so I have to ask, why starting a production company is not easy, and starting it as someone basically newly minted into the film industry, and during like at the height of the pandemic and lockdown and everything. What was that process like for you starting your own production company?
I think at the time I was just really young and I just wanted to make stuff because I had been kind of prepped for it in university, that as soon as you graduate you're going to go into the world and you're going to meet all the casting directors and all the producers and they're going to hire you. But that didn't happen. Yet I was still ready to just do stuff. So it felt kind of natural because I was with my friends and we were just writing scripts together and, you know, trying our best to learn how to work a camera. I didn't know what a crew was. Like starting out, it took a couple projects for me to learn. I started with one DP, and then on the next project we did together, he was like, maybe we should add like a first DC. And I was like, what is that? Yeah. So yeah, learning, like, I think with friends made it feel kind of safe and accessible for me in a world that may have otherwise not been in. Yeah.
Okay, so and you said something interesting, and this is something I've talked about recently with some of my interviews, where there are people who graduate, especially in North America, they graduate from film school, they do all this stuff, but they don't really understand the business of filmmaking.
Yeah.
And then that boggles my mind. How do you have an entire university or even programs dedicated to filmmaking, but don't talk about the business of filmmaking? Because you actually need the business side of it before you even get to the artistic side of it. Because you gotta get the money, you gotta get the funding, you gotta figure out how to build a crew. You know, you can't start a legitimate film without the business side first.
Yeah.
And it boggles my mind that that is something that is not standard across the board in any country, because the only school that I'm aware of that does teach production and does teach film as a business is in South Korea, and I think it's called the Asian Film Institute. I could be wrong. I always remember it starts. I think the initials are AFI, because I always mix it with the production company AFI in the thing.
Yeah.
So I think that's what it is. I think it's called the Asian Film Institute. But their whole thing is teaching production, is teaching how to be a producer, the business side, the accounting, all of that. But it boggles my mind that there are no schools in North America that don't, or even in Europe, that seem to teach the business of filmmaking.
Yeah, I'm not sure why that happens. I went to UBC, which like we spent a lot of time doing plays and like learning how to audition and stuff, but even until my last year, I didn't learn that I should be like off book when I go to an audition. So for my first 3 years, I was auditioning with like a piece of paper in my hand. So that's not even business, but like that, I mean, kind of, because that's my interview to get the job. And then in my last year, we finally did a class, I think, on taxes as an actor. But I would have loved to learn, honestly, like how to make a spreadsheet, like how to make a budget, where to find the templates. I learned more of that through doing like government grants, you know? And like no shade, I guess it is an acting program, so all cool that we did act, but I'd like to learn how to get the job and keep the job and make my own work when there's no work. So.
And even protect yourself legally getting the job.
Yes.
Like to teach you how to read a contract, how to make how to get favorable conditions and clauses for yourself. You know, you talked about the taxes, but that's just one thing. Like you gotta figure out like permits and all that kind of stuff. Like, and why? If anyone who watches this works at a film school, tell me.
Add a permit class or budget, like producing class. I think everyone should know.
A basic accounting class, you know, administration. Because there is I went to a seminar here, and I went because the film that I was planning to say can I get into, so I went to a seminar with another filmmaker, and it was post-production, and it was basically the company is called Purple Dog, and so like they did a seminar on what post-production actually is, and they talked a lot about the logistics, and like I even asked questions about the administrators. I'm like, who's the person that does all of these spreadsheets? And like the guy who owns the company, who started, he said like he had to learn on the fly too, because there was no way when he became a producer, he had no idea how to do these spreadsheets. You know, he talked about the deliverables. Like he has to learn all of that on the fly because it was not taught.
Yeah.
Right. And I'm like,
even I still see that when I work with companies sometimes. Like now that I edit my own films, I'll like submit stuff and then I won't get like a spec sheet. You know what? I'd love to have a sheet that tells me how I should export the file, like which color settings, which sound settings, because everybody is different, but like it isn't taught in schools, and it should be. It seems to be something you acquire with experience, and some of it is like gate kept still.
Yeah, right.
Yeah.
Which makes no sense. And yes, this actually does tie into the film, because the thing is like you did this film where you're starting a production company, and so you're dealing with learning all of this logistics and still managing the creative side of making a film, right? Because you start production, you're doing the producing yourself, and instead of having a producer do all of that for you.
Yes.
So that is just all extra burden, especially to do again for your first film. Most people don't produce. There's people who do, because I've interviewed people who do, but it is still rare for most people to do it, especially getting fresh out of school and just taking on all of that. So just talk to me a bit about the emotional, like the emotional and mental thing, because like, and it ties into Foreigner, because in Foreigner, like mental health is a theme in the film.
Yeah, for sure. And I can touch more on Yasmin later, but for me, like bringing the story to life, it was really tough, because it's like at this budget level, you can't afford to pay people as much as you want to and as much as you should. And like, I have to thank my crew because they worked so hard as like almost volunteers, I would say, to make the film happen. For the amount of work they did, they should have gotten like hundreds of thousands of dollars, in my opinion. But because I couldn't give that to them, I felt this like sense of responsibility and guilt that I have to get all this paperwork done and I have to figure out these locations and go and do the scouts and like, you know, beg for connections and stuff like that to make things happen. I was really lucky. Like, I did have a team on my producing team. I had like an exec, a line producer, a co-producer, another producer, and then an associate. But they're all my friends, you know what I mean? So they were just being extremely kind and helpful because they believed in me and in the project. And like, so it took a lot of us leveraging connections and asking for favors to make the movie happen. Again, because I think it's like kind of a standard of like low budget film. I don't know where I'm going with this, but like, I lost my train of thought. But yeah, it's tough when you have X amount of money to make a film of that scale, if that makes sense. It'll make sense when you see the movie. I think that's what I'm
No, I understand what you mean, because it's a feature-length film, so it's not even a short film, it's a feature-length film, which has, of course, a wider budget than a short film, which means there's way more logistics and administrative work and all of this to cover. So, like, you have what you possibly call it even a micro budget, but there's still a certain level of production quality that you want to get and maintain with a film that is, again, a feature film, right?
Yes, and it's the same as a short, but 50 times the amount of scenes, and people, I think, have higher expectations, especially at Fantasia, where you're like playing against studio films or someone with maybe like a cult following already from a previous festival. Like, it's hard to maintain the standard.
Yeah, I get it. And so, which came first, creating the production company or doing the screenplay and script for Foreigner?
Creating the production company. Yes. So basically, there's two production companies. There's the Harlequin Theatre Society, which is like our umbrella company that we started in 2020 to make our own work and be with friends. And then there's a single purpose company, which Telefilm asked us to make for Foreigner. I think for this is an educational thing, for legality and stuff, so that you're protected against the film. If anything happens with the film, you're sued, it goes to the company, not to you as the individual.
The company covers the liability if anything happens. Okay.
Yeah. Good thing that I wish I'd learned in school.
And no, that kind of makes sense because it would be considered a subsidiary of your main company, right? And like they're basically subsidiaries are created for like temporary projects where as soon as the project is over, whatever, they collapse it and absorb whatever profits is made. But it exists simply to be basically like a scapegoat.
Yes.
You know, and protect like the main budget and the financials of the bigger company.
Yes.
I never thought about that being applicable for film, but it makes sense.
Yes. And the Harlequin Theatre, we do like more of our non-profit stuff. So that's for like honorariums and like, that's another thing I learned so much about is like what's non-profit, what's for-profit. And it's like this tricky zone with this movie because it's not at a budget level yet that would make millions and millions of dollars unless it became some kind of cult breakthrough. It's basically like you acquire grants and then that goes into paying people, feeding people, taking care of your crew, and then you just kind of make back the grant per se, but that's just going to go into another movie.
Profit, so
exactly. So is film for profit? I don't know. So that's level.
In the midst of all of this, when did the idea for Foreigner come to you?
So Foreigner came to me because of the Telefilm grant Deghan. They had asked a question of what does it mean to be Canadian somewhere in the grant guidelines. They were looking for movies about Canadian identity and Canadian culture, and I kind of in my director's statement was like, well, what does that even really mean? Because we are such like a tapestry of different cultures on unceded land. So are you talking about Indigenous people? Or are you talking about people who've settled here, or first gen like me? So that's kind of where the idea of the movie came about. It's me exploring the question of identity when you are first gen or newly moved as an immigrant. Yeah.
Right, because a question like that depends on the person you ask, right?
Yeah.
If you're asking a First Nations Indigenous person, their idea of what it means to be Canadian is going to be completely different to anyone, you know?
Yes.
Even to the white people who would say, my family has been here for 4 generations, your identity of Canadian identity is going to differ vastly to First Nations, because they have not only the foundational history of being ancestors of the country, but the history of just being colonized and watching their land slowly shrink, their corner gets slowly smaller and smaller and smaller,
Yes.
as all of these big cities and stuff expand, right? So like it's gonna be different. And like me, I'm an immigrant, I'm from Barbados, you know, so my idea of being Canadian is vastly different, because when I'm here, I think of myself as Canadian and Barbadian, but when I go back home to Barbados for a visit, I'm strictly in a Barbadian mindset, right?
Yeah, very interesting.
Very different.
Yeah, no, I feel that I think part of the story came from me feeling like I have this split life where at home I'm one way and I speak one language and I eat one type of food and interact with my family in a Persian way, and then when I go to school, it's like if I bring that food from home, everyone kind of is like, what is that? I feel like now in recent times, like bullying has been curbed a bit more and people are starting to appreciate more food. Like it's trendy now to like have sushi or like but like before when I was a kid, it wasn't as cool, I would say. Like McDonald's was cool if I brought McDonald's to school.
Yeah.
So,
The funny thing, you mentioned food first, like that was actually one of the questions that comments that I wanted to make about it, because like for the character of Yasmin, played by Deghan, like her food isn't made fun of at school per se, but when she's home, she doesn't want it. You know, she rejects it when her grandmother offers her the food. She rejects it before she even has a chance to take it to school and be made fun of.
Yeah.
But she's already in the mindset that anything Iranian is just not wanted.
Yes.
She doesn't even give people a chance to like mock her food. She's like, I'm gonna just reject it myself. And I thought that was really interesting.
Thank you.
Because it made me think, because as I was watching the film, it made me think of how like ethnic food is now super trendy.
Yes,
You know,
right.
all of these, and then even and this was probably like say the last several years, but even before then, you got all of North American in particular love doing fusion foods. You know, ethnic things could appeal to white people.
Yes.
And then you got all these people, again, like there are people of all races from North America, but predominantly white people. Again, go to like ethnic countries, like they'll go to Pakistan, Iran, they go to all over the Middle East, Morocco, different countries all over Africa and Asia, and they're like, I'm going for an experience. You know, I'll use Bali as an example because Bali has become their mecca for these digital nomads. I hate that word because you're an immigrant, right? but it's because they associate immigrant with something negative and only for people of color.
Yeah.
But they call themselves, I'm an expat or digital nomad, because they want to use. I'm going a bit on a diatribe here, but forgive me, but it actually applies because it's like they're trying to put this whole different moniker on it because they want to separate themselves from the term of immigrant and immigration, because they made the terms immigrant and immigration into negative terms, you know?
Yes.
So they're like, I'm going to separate this thing that I label these other people as, and I'm going to call myself a digital nomad, meaning I'm going to these other people's countries not paying taxes because I'm being paid by European and American companies, collecting all this money, getting all the profit, paying nothing back into the countries, and I'm doing all this remote work so I can go live on a beach, live the perfect vacation life. And they do it in the Middle East too, because there are people all over the Middle East who travel and go on all these excursions, whatever, and like you people, when you go back and make fun of people's food.
I don't get it. That was like something actually really important to me when I was making the movies. There is this connotation with the term immigrant that is kind of negative. Like it seems as though you've like left your whole country and you've come here and you're like struggling, and but like I know many successful immigrants that like contribute a lot, that employ a lot of people in Canada, for example. So it was important for me to like make this family interesting. Like I didn't want them to live in a dingy, broken apartment with a crumbling shed. Like I wanted to show you can still be an immigrant and be successful and have a beautiful house and live in a country and be successful. And I put the dad in like work clothes because I want to imply that he's going to work with his suit and tie. Like I didn't want it to feel as though they were necessarily coming here to struggle. Maybe they were just coming here to start fresh. So yeah, like those 3-dimensional layered characters were important, I think.
And what I like about it is that, again, the dad, Ali, played by Ashkan
Nejati, yeah.
What I love about him is that when they make the move, he knows inherently that his daughter is not going to fit in immediately.
True.
But he doesn't pressure her.
Yeah.
He just lets her kind of find her way.
Yeah.
But he also makes sure that he doesn't speak to her anything about fitting in anyway. When they're driving to school, he's playing their Persian music, you know? He's cracking jokes, and he's talking to her, and he's just like, and he's just telling, and he's speaking to her in English. Yeah. And he speaks to her both in English and in Farsi. And like, because he knows that her speaking English is important to her. Yeah. You know, so he makes a point to communicate in English with her. But he also sings the Farsi music, you know? He's like, I'm driving to these white people's school, but as I'm driving, you're going to hear your culture coming out of the speakers, right?
Exactly.
And so talk to me about him, because as an immigrant, again, like, he settles in. The story is about Yasmi, but like he's settled in. You show that because immigrating as an adult can be extremely difficult. Yeah. And I think difficulty for him comes in is he's not talking about work or whatever, because again, it's Yasmin's story, but the difficulty for him is coming in watching his daughter lose herself. Yeah. You know, that's the difficulty of becoming an immigrant for him. Watching his daughter lose herself, that's where his immigrant struggle is coming from.
Yeah, I spent a good part of my life teaching, and I work a lot with parents and their kids, and I hear often from like dads, I don't understand my daughter anymore now that she's like 13. Can you talk to her? So it's like, I think that's something that, like, immigrant or not, like, everyone can relate to. Like, there's a phase when you become a teenager where you just want to be cool and you can't connect with your family anymore. So that's like something I wanted to show, but like, yeah, like I think there's a whole other movie that I could probably make about the dad and
just
what it's
tell
like
it from the dad's perspective.
Literally, I think that's honestly like my plan for my next feature is I want to do something similar, but like darker and from the perspective of an adult who's moving, because that's difficult. Like, I feel like when you move here younger, or like in my case, I was born here, but you still have that influence. You just kind of assimilate by default because it's the cool thing to do at school, and you can't really be both until later in life when you have like an awakening and you want to embrace more of your culture. But for someone who like moves as an adult, it's kind of like, wouldn't everybody like to live on their own soil if it was like safe to do so, if you felt comfortable, if you had all the same opportunities? So when you come as an adult, you're leaving like all of that behind. That's something that I could go more into depth about the dad in a future film, but I hope that like pieces of that kind of show through.
No, it does, because again, I moved here when I was 26. I moved to my sisters, so we are adults, right? Yeah. I talk about it often because I want people to understand that being an immigrant is not easy. Yeah. Uprooting your life and leaving everyone, everything, your food, your culture, just not being able to hear your own dialect and accent or even language spoken consistently is a huge change. Yeah. And I talk about it often because a lot of people who have never immigrated or aren't familiar, people who aren't immigrated, don't fully understand how that messes with your head. Yeah. Like, that messes with your head, because one of my most heartbreaking moments, like when I first moved here, I think for like the first few weeks, in my head I was thinking I was on vacation. You know, and my head was thinking I was kind of this vacation mindset, because my sister and I were going around with our dad, we were going around Toronto, getting familiar with the city and whatever. Like, sometimes I just take the train to go downtown to just like get accustomed to the subway. Even getting on the subway was a trip, because in Barbados we don't have a subway, and like just going underground was like apprehensive for me, because I have claustrophobia. So just getting on the subway and in the train took me a long time to adjust to, and doing it for like 45 minutes an hour depending on where you're going was difficult. Yeah. And then like I remember I always think about it, because my first job was at a Shoppers Drug Mart downtown. I was a merchandiser. When it occurred to me that I live here, that I had my Canadian citizenship from the time I was like 13 because my dad used to live here years ago.
Nice.
And Canada had this policy that if you had a parent that lived in Canada for 15 plus years, you could get a Canadian citizenship by way of your parent having their own status.
Right.
They scrapped that program, but my sister and I got that way. So I always had Canadian passport and citizenship. But I got my first paycheck and I saw them take out income tax. And income tax means not only income tax means meant for me. Oh wait, I live here now. This is where I live. This is permanent. And I cried every day for 6 weeks after that.
I'm so sorry. It's interesting you mentioned this because while I was in production for Foreigner, I was also working with my partner who was immigrated here to complete his PR. So we were like doing that process as we were in rehearsal. So it was interesting because I was talking to the dad, I was like, oh, maybe we should give you a briefcase or something like that, and that can have all your documents in it because you're working on like, it's such a process, it's so much paperwork and it's so much like research. And now we're lucky we have things like YouTube where it's like you can go and see how someone else did it and learn from that. But I imagine like 20, 30 plus years ago, before it was like more mainstream and there was so much content accessible to people, like you would definitely have to get a lawyer, and that's expensive. You would have to do lots and lots of research and look through books and encyclopedias and stuff at the library. Like it must be a lot of work.
It was a big process. Like when my dad got our citizenship, my sister and I, we were like 13, 12, 13, so we had no idea. But when we were immigrating to move here, my sister was working full time at that time, and I wasn't really working. So I was the one who was going to the consulate.
Yeah.
I was the one handling all the paperwork, and my dad was handling on his side because he was in Canada at that time, preparing stuff for us. And that was a long process even in of itself.
Yeah.
And so when people say, oh, just go back where you come from, I'm like, you people have no idea. Take no credit just to get here. It is not easy.
No. You're not going to just like go back.
They think it's as simple as buying a plane ticket and getting on a plane and going back. No, there's logistics. There's like a whole process.
I've heard cases too of people that stay in a country for like 10 years and then all of a sudden a government will decide you're not enough for the country and you're deported.
Yeah.
Again, like this has happened recently to some people that I know. So it's like, it's such a difficult process. Why move if you moved in the first place to move somewhere else perhaps?
Right.
Yeah, like
right. So like, I imagine for the dad dealing with all of that and having his own, he's dealing with Yasmin and his mother, like, but he can't talk about that because he doesn't want to stress them.
Yeah.
So as I was watching the film, I was just thinking in my head, like, this girl has no idea everything her dad is going through. So like, but like he's just like focused on her because it's just like this is the battle that he has to fight now.
Yeah. And he's the only man in the house, like I know men are considered more privileged, but in this case, like he had his wife died, and then it's just him and his daughter and his mother. So
he's going through the grieving process and he's grieving his wife at the same time.
Yes.
Right?
Yeah.
So there's all of these hidden layers in this film, just in the family, in the household itself, that like I thought about it. I was just like, this is so much more than just Yasmin.
Thank you.
But like, and so like again, if you think about it, that's all I was thinking about. Like, there's all of these things happening in this family. Talk to me about the grandmother. We're talking more about Yasmin, of course, but the grandmother is Zorde, and she's played by Mariam. I can't read my own handwriting.
Sadeli, probably.
I can't read my own handwriting.
All good. I like the cursive. So
yeah, we were taught cursive in back home in Barbados, but talk to me about her because she doesn't speak English.
Yeah.
So she's moved to a country where she doesn't speak the language.
Yeah. Thanks for pointing that out.
And she's home most of the time, so she doesn't have anyone to communicate with because she hasn't made a community. She hasn't met any women.
Yeah.
And so she's grieving the loss of her own daughter-in-law. She's being supportive for Ali, and she's just like Ali, watching her granddaughter lose herself, and she's trying to keep her grounded with the food. That's how she's showing like honor our culture through the food and all of this. But she herself is watching her granddaughter slip away in front of her eyes, and she's seeing the signs that something is deeply, deeply wrong here.
Yeah.
And again, this is like a grandmother's intuition, but she's tying it into realizing, oh wait, this is much more than just assimilation. Like she's like, this is a demon.
Yeah.
And it's a demon called Amazara, located apparently in not only in mostly in Middle Eastern and African cultures. It's a demon that attacks women.
Yeah.
Predominantly. So she's seeing all of this and she's like, Ali can't help me because he's a man, right?
Yeah.
And so like, he can't deal with this, and she's like, I don't have my daughter-in-law here because she's gone, and she's like, this is probably the same thing that took my daughter-in-law.
Yeah.
So talk to me about Zoe because she's like, I love her. She's a great mom.
Thank you so much. Yeah, so Zora was played by a co-worker's mom, and she auditioned for us out of the blue, and was just like so warm and so sincere, so that really like seeped its way into the character. I think, as you said, the most interesting thing that I kind of subconsciously wrote into the script is the fact that she can't even communicate with anyone other than her own family, because she doesn't speak the language. She's still learning piece by piece, and there are some deleted scenes that didn't fit the film, but where she tries to speak with like Rachel, but yeah, so like I think the only way that she can express herself and connect is through like love and sharing the culture through food, and interesting that you mentioned the czar, because when I was researching kind of which demon to use, the czar in Middle Eastern and North African culture is known as kind of a demon or a cultural phenomenon that follows immigrants when they move from one country to another. And so crazy things start happening, like people begin banging their heads against the walls and like speaking in tongues, and you cure it through music and like through the beat of a drum, right. Which we put into the soundtrack. So yeah, it's interesting that that's kind of how she connects with Yasmin and gets through to hers, by sharing the truth about this demon and about cultural assimilation, essentially.
Yeah, I thought it was like, when the grandmother said it's a demon, I'm like, the cultural assimilation is the demon.
Yes.
And like, again, and it's not like necessarily only about whiteness, it's just about the making people feel that they're not good enough themselves.
Yeah.
Is evil. Like, you know, like denigrating people for simply speaking another language. Like, you should be glad that, like, you should be impressed that these people can speak multiple languages, because you can.
Yeah.
Right? And it's just like, so like, she's like, this is demonic, you know? And she's like, watching her daughter dye her hair blonde, magically get blue eyes. Her skin is, I swear her skin was also getting lighter.
Yeah, she was getting lighter. She was getting, there was like bugs underneath the skin,
right? So
like something's
like,
in her.
Right.
Yeah.
So she was like, this is demonic, like assimilation, because I always make the distinction between assimilation and integration.
Yeah.
And Yasmin wasn't integration, she was fully assimilating, and my grandmother was like, this is just straight up evil.
Yeah.
This is robbing me of my granddaughter, you know, and it robbed me of my daughter-in-law because I had the daughter-in-law.
Yeah.
And the film starts with Yasmin's mother telling her she needs to learn to speak English fluently because it would because speaking English fluently would protect her from demons. But when it seems in actual fact that speaking English fluently is inviting the demon into her.
Yeah.
So talk about that. I thought that was interesting. I was like, she's associating English with demons. I'm like, the colonizer's language.
I think that a lot of why Yasaman chooses to assimilate is like due to grief, which is something that I've kind of like learned from bits and pieces of my parents' story of like, this may be like TMI, sorry mom, but like I know my mom immigrated to Canada like on the night that she arrived, her father passed away. So she had to carry, like, her first impression of this new country is like, I've lost a family member. And I think a lot of people, you know, take on new hobbies in life and like change themselves to escape grief. And at the same time, her mom was also the one promoting sitcoms to her and like giving, there's a little shot, I don't know if anyone will notice, but there's some sitcoms on the floor of Yasmin's bedroom that say English sitcoms or American sitcoms love mom. So from the beginning, she associates this culture with like promise and hope to her mom. And her mom has blonde hair, and so does Rachel. So I think she's seeing that like sense of safety and girlhood and like youth connection, if that makes sense, to her mom. Whereas like her grandma's much older and much more kind of like in the culture. So it must be harder for Yasaman to connect with her grandma than it was to her mom. So, yeah.
And also she's again at that age where she's take the assimilation, take the Persian ancestry. She's at that age in general where because we were once teenagers.
Yes.
Where we're trying to just find ourselves away from our parents, our grandparents, you know. So she's just in that rebellious age.
Yeah.
But it sucks that rebellious age coincided with their family immigrating. It coincided with her seeing these evil, evil ass white girls. And all of this, it was like the perfect start for the worst outcome possible.
Totally.
You know, everything that could go wrong went wrong.
Yeah.
And so she got all these raging hormones, and she's in the rebellious teenage, but then she's also like, I want to be like these white girls. And she's like, I don't want my Middle Eastern heritage. I don't want to speak Farsi. I don't want like food. You know, I don't want to hear the music. I'm gonna put my legs in this, and that scene cracked me up because I was thinking about it when she had her legs up on the dashboard. I'm like, girl, take your legs down.
And then the dad says it. Yeah,
like,
such a Persian, like, I don't know. It's like, I think any BIPOC like girl will have the experience of the parents being like, do not do that.
Yeah, I know.
The shoe comes in like,
you know, put your foot up on the dashboard.
Yes.
Like, that's just a recipe for disaster. But talk about the perfect storm and working with Rose and figuring out how she would work her way through this storm.
Rose is amazing. Rose was like the last person that we saw for the role, and we saw her first through a self-tape where she spoke in English. So I messaged her on TikTok and I was like, hey, I really like you. Do you happen to speak Farsi? And she's like, OMG, yes, please email my agent. So we did. We called her back on Zoom, and then we paired her with the dad, and they did a scene opposite each other where they were yelling at each other.
Yeah.
She nailed it. And like the more I got to know Rose, the more I was like, oh my gosh, this is my twin from like the east coast of Canada. Both our parents play music. She plays music. Like we both had kind of like darker phases of our life. She's a very sweet person. Like we remind each other of ourselves. So she was very easy to work with. It was her first feature, and she was 19 when we filmed it. So like, I can't believe that she was able to sustain that kind of stamina for that many days. But yeah, Rose was like great. I feel like she really understood Yasaman inside out. She told me many times, it feels like I'm like playing myself in a way. Because I think even like this movie is also for first gen people or like mixed race people, in the sense that there is still that split kind of life that's happening, and so I felt Rose really understood that.
Talk a bit about the setting of 2004, because I thought it was interesting, because like I interviewed earlier last year another Iranian Canadian filmmaker, Netta Shachar, but her film was set in more current times.
Nice.
But your film being in 2004 was interesting. Why 2004?
I really wanted, when I was a kid, to be in a movie like Mean Girls or a TV show like Gossip Girl. Like I always saw these like gorgeous white women in the best designer clothes and the cutest mini skirts and like perfectly curled hair, and I was like, ooh, I want to look like that. I started a fashion blog when I was like 8 or 9. I don't know what I was doing on the internet, but where I would like post pictures of myself in like mini skirts and like design outfits and stuff. So when I became a filmmaker, something that's kind of been a running thing in my work is like I like my Persian lead girls to like be in cute clothes, and so it kind of like spun on its head in a way, because when I was younger, again, I would like write these blogs, and I would sometimes write stories even at that age, and I would always write these white characters. So it was fun to kind of like twist that again by going back to the years when I was a kid and then creating this character that becomes white, but it doesn't like end well for her. So yeah, like I've always loved the aesthetic, but I never saw myself on screen during that time. So I wanted to take a character that looked like me, that had my experience, and put her on screen in those clothes.
Yes, and that setting, because at the beginning you kind of mentioned like films like Heathers and Mean Girls, and for me, Clueless is like not exactly the same genre.
But yeah, there's this uncanny valley thing happening right now too, with like girls that all look the same. I don't know if you've seen this like on TikTok. It's like you can scroll, and like almost every girl like has plastic surgery now, and we all look the same. No distinct.
They're getting the fillers, they're getting the cheekbones, they're using, and even if they're not getting plastic surgery, they're using the same filters on Instagram. So like the film does talk about that. Like this whole
all 3 girls look the same.
and it's about assimilating, right? And it's like like the film is about cultural assimilation and like ethnic, but like in real life it's also just assimilating into this aesthetic of what is considered attractive, and it's like not even attractive because I'm like, why do you want to look fake? But that's a whole discussion. But we get to wrap up now. But I wanted to talk about something I thought was really interesting. So the three mean girls in this case, the evil girls. Something I thought was interesting is that like there's Rachel, Emily, and Kristen. Yeah. And every time they're talking to Yasi, they have this very creepy look on their face.
Thanks. Yeah.
But no one clocks it. No one else notices it. No one else is walking past like, why are you guys being creepy? Yeah. No one else does. Talk to me about that, because I was kind of thinking that maybe they're the harbingers of the star. You know, they're the ones who brought the demon to Yasi.
I'm glad you saw that. That's really good. Yeah, because I wanted to leave it kind of open, because it could be the story is ultimately told through Yasemin's eyes. So like whatever she feels and sees is reflected. Even the music, like we put music in every time she gets anxiety. So that is reflective of her inner vibe. But who knows if those girls are even being that creepy, you know? Like it's like maybe that's how she sees them. And the same with the parents later that come, and they're all up in her face, and they're like, there's a scene where Rachel's dad is talking to her, and he's like, you're gonna poison my Rachel, you're gonna infect her, and then something happens and she snaps out of it, and he's like, neglect. So yeah, there's been like times where I think like I misread people as well, where it's like someone's like, where are you from? And I'm like, I don't know. And then Canada, and they're like, where are you actually from? Like, oh, you're so interesting. Like, and maybe some people are genuinely curious, but those questions have like stuck with me for a long time. So I do agree that I think that they low-key like brought it on. When I was writing the script, I was like toying with the idea of like, what if it was more like a Get Out situation where it's like the parents are involved and it's like a grand scheme. But I found it more interesting for this story to go with the route of like the main characters kind of going through it herself, and these people just, the whole environment is toxic, if that makes sense.
It does. School can be toxic, and destructive. But you have to round it. But thank you so much for taking the time.
Thank you for having me. It was so much fun. Yeah.
This was a great discussion, not only about the film but also about the Canadian film industry. Because as you mentioned, I had never thought about like the whole subsidiary thing, but it makes sense. Well, I also learned something new today.
Thank you. Yeah. No. It's really interesting, and I hope that this just encourages more voices to come to the screen, young voices. A lot of my team was like in their 20s and like teens. So like I'd love to see more films from young people that want to talk about these issues, and I hope that it's also a film that anyone, whether you're an immigrant or not, can relate to, because we've all been scared of a high school cheerleader at some point. So even the high school cheerleaders have been scared of the older high school cheerleader. So
we always think about, we love school, but then like, because we got the nostalgia, but like really was like, those were some of the worst years also of our lives. Some of the best, but also some of the worst. But
I don't think I've been through anything as dark, you know, as being a teenager.
Thank you so much, and congratulations.
Thank you, Carolyn. Very nice to talk to you, and thank you for getting the deeper meaning of the story, the real horror of erasure. Yeah, thank you.
Thank you.
Bye.